G'day legends, I hope that you're having a great day and a great start to the week, no matter where you are. Now, before we jump into the main sort of meat of this video, and we're going to look at some maps, some information that I'll send across as well, but what I really want to say is we need to remember that this war, what is happening, and people on Twitter and looking at these maps, I think that we forget that we see the map move, we see information come out, whatever, but that these are tens of thousands of young men in their lives giving up their futures and giving up so much for what is happening here. And it is just horrific that there's tens of thousands of people fighting here, and every inch gained or lost is gained and lost with the spilling of blood. And no matter where you land on the political side of this, the narrative side, these are still humans. They have parents, they have brothers and sisters, they have a home, they had dreams of what they wanted to do, they had a history, and that is being absolutely stripped from them, and this is just horrible. And I think we need to remember that these are just young guys fighting, and that us back here, privileged, you're watching me on YouTube on your smartphone and scrolling through Twitter, we're privileged to majority of us living in relative peace, and that we should all strive to maintain our morality and our humanity. Now, a lot of footage that's coming out is fake. We're going to talk about that. So much of it is staged for the purpose of propaganda. But as we see with this, to a lot of people, the truth doesn't matter as long as it fits their narratives and their own biases. And what I've seen through this is then that feeds this mob mentality that has reasonable, moral people calling for and justifying genocide of millions of people. You're calling for that, and it is absolutely disgusting. And I actually believe it is really concerning seeing what this mentality grows like cancer, and seeing this from everyday moral normal people. I think it's bloody concerning. We need to remember that the dehumanization of the enemy, of other people, this is a coping mechanism that develops for soldiers when you're walking in the jungles, you're in the trenches, you're walking across the fields, that your mind can't cope with the amount of loss of life. That is the dehumanizing process, is a coping mechanism for this. The dehumanizing process is one of the big things soldiers struggle with when they're coming home, because they turned into that warrior animal of this and saw other people as lesser people. That is one of the big things they struggle with. And this justifying this process by sitting at home, you and I, looking at maps and scrolling on Twitter, is just shocking, and you shouldn't dehumanize a whole group of people. Look at history, look at people that dehumanized complete other groups. Go back in current to pretty recent history, and you'll see that that does not end well. Even if it starts in just, little fractions, this can go fucking huge and get spiral out of control malignantly and turn bad very quickly. And I can never get on board with just dehumanizing someone because of where they were born. Don't get me wrong, I'm a soldier. I signed the line and whatever. And if this happened in my country, I'd be the first one to sign back up and then defend the nation. Dehumanizing your enemy. But when you're talking civilians, things like this, that is where it can spiral absolutely out of control. And this is the reason I've pulled back from any biases I could try to get rid of, is because I see this on Twitter so much from the people with the flags, and I'm disgusted by it. I'm like, you're talking about 40 million people in one area, 100 plus million in the other, and you're just grouping all this just because of where they were born as that they should be eliminated. And we've seen that before. I think people have forgotten we've seen that and where that has taken us. That is, as a soldier, you should fight like hell, defend, and you should defend your nation. But there also needs to be lines drawn of where that ends, and that ends with who is your enemy, not just everyday random people. So, my rant done. We're currently in the breakthrough phase of this counter-offensive. We saw the staging, probing, shaping phase, which went on for months, and the breakthrough phase could take weeks. The phase we're seeing could absolutely take weeks, and large losses are absolutely expected. Now, this isn't the regular Intel update, but I got this across from someone heavily involved, and it does have some colourful language and ideas in it as well. But hey man, more thoughts. Currently, most of the Ukrainian armed forces axis are struggling with the exception of the Makarivka axis. Currently, it is very likely Russian forces in the Makarivka axis will be encircled as it is currently being pinched off. This is one of the few displays of Western tactical encirclement, though poorly executed by the Ukrainian armed forces to date, and we will go on the maps and we will look at these areas as well. Unfortunately, as much as I've enjoyed the taste of Russian talking tears as the Russians surrender easily defendable town after town with little fight, all while Russian supporters scream incoherent nonsense about fake news or how Russia's perfectly designed defensive lines will save Russia's forces, in which reality are poorly constructed as the defensive line doesn't make much sense, as if you can break one part of the line, the rest will struggle to support any other part. As such, it does not appear Russians are withdrawing in good order. Rather, they are withdrawing in disarray as they are giving up their defensive positions too quickly. Again, to super tactics like driving those Humvees right up to enemy positions in the middle of the day with no smoke or artillery. So I actually questioned him on some of this, and he was saying that the Russians are so easily giving up some of these towns. That's what he meant by this. With even poor tactics, they're just pulling out or not defending hard. Neither side has suffered truly major losses yet, as despite the fact Ukraine has lost almost 15% of its Bradley fleet, which is unacceptable. It still has more operational reserves to continue in the form of other IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, and when that fails, Ukraine will probably resort to gluing guys to tanks and more cowboy Hummer shit again. Russian forces, on the other hand, have a lot of tanks and artillery, as well a lot of defensive positions. However, Ukraine has to pick up the pace on the Makarivka axis, as Western-style tactical encirclement may slow down and stall the attack due to limited force economy tying down troops needed to conduct the encirclement. Ukraine has a long way to go to the sea, and while Russian defence lines are not great, they have a lot of depth positions that will take time to bypass and destroy. Only then will Ukraine have achieved deep battle-style operational breakthrough, which will allow Ukraine to threaten Russian rear areas. And so we're going to have a look at some maps, but I will say not much has happened, at least compared to yesterday. So, of course, we have Ukraine in the centre, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, and the purple since 14. The green, of course, being areas liberated by the Ukrainian armed forces. We have Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, we haven't seen any movement on this map, and the ISW map sadly hasn't updated over the last 24 hours. So since yesterday it didn't update, so we can get rid of that one. But what we have seen, so we come in here in the Novodorivka, Makarivka, Novodonetsky region in this southern push, and this is where we're seeing the most amount of ground taken, and from what I'm hearing, the most amount of successes in this as well. So this is the most recent one we've got today, updated about 12 hours ago. I've had to restart this video like 10 times because I just keep stuffing it up, but let's roll back, and this is what we've seen. So the 11th, we saw more control around the Blahatny, and then today more control in and around these fields to the south of Novodorivka. But across the whole maps, the ISW is not updated. Deep State only has these. That is all we have seen. So I can get rid of all of these because it's not useful. Now let's get the 12th of June and then the 11th of June. So this is yesterday's, and let's zoom in on this region, Now the Rybar is showing significant changes in this region, and this is a Russian sources compared to the Western maps, and I'm unsure exactly why this is. Why would the Russian sort of side maps show way more gains of these breakthrough offensives, or the attempted breakthrough of these offensives clearing these areas? Well, on just this little zoom in, if we look at the north near the Storovsevy right here, that a lot more ground has been taken by the Ukrainian armed forces, as well as in around Makarivka. Now we know Makarivka is very fluid and has gone to and from sides of control, but more control has been taken by the Russian forces, supposedly in around Uruzani, in around this other region here that I can't pronounce, and is shown by these arrows of which way things are pushing and where the grey zone is lying. So that is changing in that, and is a very fluid environment. Now, if we just come down from here, we have seen changes in Novodorivka as well, and we have seen that the Ukrainian forces have made this now into grey zone. This is what these maps are showing, and somewhat what the Deep State is showing in and around this region as well, although not as specific And we can see that Leopard has come into grey zone, same as Novodorivka into grey zone, although the deep state would say that Novodorivka is in blue zone here, as we can see. So this is very interesting, but the Rybar is showing those changes. Now, in the east of this area, we are seeing that they're saying that these were cut off, these Ukrainian offensives across here, that there is no change, or Rybar is not showing any significant changes, but just in the centre here. And that's really all the real mapping updates we actually have from those regions. Now, we have the MOD has released from the Brits during the last week. Russian Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu has maintained a high public profile, likely with the aim of presenting himself as in control of strategic issues while Ukraine accelerates offensive operations. Shoigu has provided at least 2 comments on Russia's defensive operations, including making almost certainly seriously exaggerated claims about Ukrainian losses. This contrasts with the other key periods in the war when he had disappeared from public appearance. Shoigu has also urged Russia's defense industry to redouble its efforts and castigated Western military district officers for not dispatching reserve armoured vehicles to the front quickly enough. Shoigu is likely acutely aware of the need to maintain a positive image in the face of increasingly unmasked criticism of some fellow Russians, and we've seen Prigozhin do this a lot. Now, something talked about as a lot is the first line of defence has collapsed, it has broken through. That, to my eye, just isn't correct. So if we take these, and you can click on these and have a look, these are all geolocated from satellite photos of the areas of the defensive positions. And this is the region we're talking. It says Velika, Novosilka, and this is Makarivka here. And as we talk, this is still a long way from the defensive positions. Yes, it's growing quickly, but it's still a long way from these main defensive positions. When we've said they've had a breakthrough, we're talking on these towns and these first trench positions under control, but not the major defensive build-up we have seen. They need to break through, get through this, and then make their run down here. Now, as what I got sent across from that gentleman, he does say that these aren't in the best positions to mutually support each other, and because it is a static defence, to actually go out and support dynamically can be limited. But when you see YouTubers, other people say that the defensive line has crumbled, there hasn't, to my eye, been any region where they've actually now pushed through and made a breakthrough the first defensive of these major build-up works. Doesn't matter if it's in Lobkove or in Makarivka, because that is not where those areas are. This is where they've had the build-ups over months of the concrete structures, previously sighted artillery, the dug-in positions, things like this. Where the real battle is going to be is getting through across this line. Now, once they're across this line, shit, anything could happen. But the idea that there has been a breakthrough of this already is incorrect, and there's a lot of like clickbaity sort of material as well to go with that. So the real battle is going to be once this happens, and the attritional forces will be interesting to see what happens from there. Now, it is, and here's another map showing this as well, that this is where the breakthroughs are currently in Makarivka, but here is where these major defensive positions lie. And as you can see, there's still a long way to go. So don't discount either side in this battle yet. So a lot of these images have come out, and a lot of people are pointing that these were fake generated AI, as well as we can see leopards here, but these are the specialized ones with the mine clearing tools on the front as well. But then footage was come out confirming that, although people do say that this is other angles of the previously lost ones that we saw as well. But we know that some of these specialized equipment, these mine clearers, are big things to lose. And Forbes had this article here: the Ukrainian army has already lost half its unique Leopard 2R breaching vehicles, and these are going to be super important, not only where the Ukrainian forces are now here, but they're going to be so important down here, getting through these obstacles, getting through these tank traps, through these minefields. Things like that are going to be so difficult, especially with mines being able to be laid from artillery pieces. So they are a big loss. People undersell it. People undersell and oversell losses all the bloody time. Ukraine still has plenty of equipment, plenty of reserve stuff, and would say that the main stuff hasn't really been seen yet on the battlefield, but things like that, they are a significant loss. So also, footage has come out of apparently Russian soldiers, when they were falling back through positions, being shot down by other Russian soldiers. And this does appear to be very fake footage. These guys have no weapons, no body armour. The way they fall doesn't seem in line with that actually happening, and the soldiers coming out of cover to then engage them doesn't also. It just seems very fake. And why would you do this? Propaganda. The information war is massive on both sides of the informational campaigns. What does this do? Well, it might stop guys from
volunteering to fight for the Russian forces. It shows how the Russians dehumanize themselves, further leaning into that idea as well. And there's a whole list of reasons why fake stuff like this could be made as well. We have a video here from the RDK. Now, we know there was a prisoner swap yesterday, and I believe Ukraine got back, I think it's 93 personnel. I should have checked that before I went. I'll put on the screen exactly how many it was. But there was a swap back. But interestingly, in this, and this is from War Translated, these are the Russian soldiers here, and then this bloke here gets on the bus. And here we see Denis Nikitin here, the leader of the RDK. And we do know that Nikitin is a very infamous right-wing figure throughout Europe. He's banned from a lot of areas as well, and he's the leader of this here. So he's from Moscow. He's a Russian-born citizen of the Russian Federation, and he's trying to recruit these guys to come, to not go back, not be swapped back, and come and fight for him, explaining how he's the commander for the Russian citizens that fight for Ukraine since the start of the war. He says they're fighting rather successfully, and we've seen these crosses into Belgorod, and that you have a choice to either be swapped back or then to stay and fight with the RDK in the exchange, in the I Want to Live program, and stay in Ukraine. Now, one thing I will say about this is the Ukrainian side do absolutely distance themselves from Nikitin and the RDK, although they will say, oh, they're part of infantry fighting here, but we have nothing to do with their cross-border operations, what they do. But we do know that POW stuff is very tightly controlled, and Nikitin is free range in and out of these areas. So the I Want to Live program is basically trying to get Russians to then surrender across as well, and here then to fight what he says is fighting for the good side or for justice. So the RDK with other Russian citizens, as well as Polish citizens who are in the RDK and have crossed that border and then fight Putin's army within the Russian Federation. And that this is their last chance to not be swapped back. Here we see one hand go up of this guy wanting to fight for Russia from here. That he doesn't want to be exchanged back in this prisoner swap. Now, interestingly, he says that he fought for PMC Wagner. Now, we know that Prigozhin has stated that there are very harsh realities for guys who get captured, exchanged back, as well as anyone who knows about the hammer of justice, or whatever they called it, as well for guys who did surrender. Interestingly, that the RDK could very likely be fighting Prigozhin's Wagner within the Belgorod region as well. And that hoping that they won't have to fight again against each other. Of course, a very interesting thing done of trying to get guys to then come and fight for you, and that exchange program from there. Now, the authenticity of this, well, we don't know the authenticity of much, but it's very interesting to see that recruitment of those guys, and you see posters like that all around the country as well. Now, this one's probably all over the place. There's realistically, there's a lot happening, but no information being released out. The campaign is massive. When there's a lot happening, a lot comes out, but when there's not a lot or some non-success, not much comes out either. So it's very difficult to know exactly what is going on the ground. For some reason, I just couldn't speak. I've restarted the video, I think 4 or 5 times. So God knows, but we got one out in the end. So thank you very much. If you'd like to support me, links down below, but never feel obliged. I wouldn't support me for this crappy video either. But look after yourselves. I'll speak to you soon. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.